Welcome back to another episode, y'all. Thank you. Thank you so much, like we've said in the past, for your support here on Patreon, on Anchor, buying our merch, just giving us a like or a follow on Instagram. It's meant so much to us that you've kind of helped us grow this community into what it is. And the podcast kind of speaks for itself. We're going on to almost 2 years now. Not skipping a beat on posting and giving y'all some fresh new episodes. But as you might have noticed, Marcia's not joining us today. My name's Marybeth. I will be your host. I'm sitting in Northern California on Ohlone land, and I'm wearing black glasses, a gray sweatshirt, sitting in my living room. Very, very colorful living room. And I'm super excited to have our guest join us today. Be a nice, intimate conversation with just the two of us. New and somewhat longtime friend of mine, Melina Nakos. I'm super, super excited to have you join us and kind of just talk about your experience as a Hispanic lesbian filmmaker, quad amputee, public accommodations, just everything that you've already done so far as a producer, director. You recently featured me on Lifetime, and I had a freaking blast those 12 or so hours that we were together, and just the voice and the platform that you're able to provide for folks like us. And sitting in New York on Lenape land. Welcome, Mel. So excited.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm Mel. I'm wearing a green dress with little blue and white flowers. I have brown curly hair, and I'm wearing headphones, and in front of me is a small microphone. So it's so good to be here.
Yay. And shout out to Blue Slate Films for letting you borrow the microphone.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. My incredible mentors, Natalia and Emery, have so graciously lent me a microphone so that I can be heard loud and clear.
The audio quality is amazing. So
I hope so. I did like a test with the microphone on Zoom just to make sure that like everything was a-okay. And I hope for the best that that nothing goes wrong, but I did like a little test, so hopefully that test holds up.
No, you'll be fine. And like everyone just uses their MacBook Pro, or so far no one's logged in on their cell phone, but you're already
I feel like
one,
that would
two
be an
steps ahead.
interesting choice.
And you're looking great. I love the makeup you've got going today.
Thank you. I was just like telling you earlier. I was just like telling you earlier that I literally never wear makeup. I think I'm just like too lazy. I used to, like when I was younger, I would like every single day like get up before at like 5:30 a.m. before
like
high school and like do my makeup. And then I got to college and I was like, I'm not putting that effort in.
And it depends where you go to college too, because I feel like me moving from Los Angeles to Berkeley, such different vibes, right? People went to school with freaking sweatpants, did not care about their hair or makeup. So
I think that like in New York, it's funny because it's so like I went to NYU and the vibes are like so like person to person, but nobody cares. That's the thing that's like so beautiful. Like, cause I saw people that would like come like dressed to the nines every single day, 8 a.m. class, like dressed like Gucci, like just like beautiful clothes. And then like I'd be like, there were people who would like show up in like American Eagle sweatpants and like a t-shirt, and but like nobody like cared either way, or at least like that's not what I experienced. There was no, I think that there was there wasn't like an attitude that you had to come in like one way or another, at least at Tisch. But things might have been different like school to school, but I never really experienced that. And I was one of the people that like showed up in like sweatpants and jeans at like the day to day. If you see like any sort of like fit, I was like,
and that's what I love. That's what I've heard about New York too, is that of course it's the hub of the fashion industry freaking like everything, all the artists are there and they're
Yeah.
dressing to the nines, but there's way less judgment than there is in LA Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like if we weren't wearing the proper brands, we were outed, we were outcast. And I don't know. So tell me about you. You moved from the Bay Area to New York and you've been there for the last, how long now?
I've been here for going on 7 years now.
Damn.
I think, yeah, like in August, it'll be, no, 6 years. In August, it'll be 6 years that I've moved here. Stayed here like throughout the whole pandemic, like never left. Like my family moved here because like my brother's was in Philadelphia, is now moving to New York as well. But both my parents are immigrants. My dad is from Greece. My mom is from South America. So they were always like, both of them were kind of like not super tied down to California.
Right.
Because they didn't like grow up there. They moved there like after college. So it's one of those things where I don't think I ever felt like beholden to going back to California of like, oh yeah, this is like my home. So when I like moved to New York and I loved it here, I felt like totally comfortable like staying here. And I hope I never have to leave because I love New York. But what happens, but I love it here.
I love
You're
that.
from California, right?
Yeah. I was born in the Philippines in Manila, and at the age of 1, then I moved, flew over to Los Angeles and then moved up to Berkeley, NorCal for school, and have kind of stayed here. So pretty much the same thing. And I think for immigrants too, it's just from one coast to another, it doesn't really make a difference. But when you're in the Midwest, in those center states, that's when you're like, wait a minute, this isn't the US that I remember as a brown person, or as as an immigrant still trying to make it out in the world. So I love that though. I love that you're all kind of together. And NYU, New York, is where you met production, where you met all of these projects, the 2 wonderful ladies that you work with now, right? Tell me about how you kind of got started there.
So I started screenwriting when I was 13 in California. And at the time I was going to like a school that was like all about STEM. So I had no idea what I was doing. None of my teachers had any idea what I was doing. Like the college counselors had no idea like how to help me. Like I was like truly like the black sheep at that school. But I went to summer programs that were geared towards film and screenwriting. And that's kind of like how I started out. And it was sort of one of those things that it was all about like beg, borrow, steal, like trying to convince people to like come and like help me on these projects, because none of these people had none of them like particularly like cared about film.
Yeah, I'm like no interest if you're in STEM.
No interest. My parents were extremely supportive. Like right off the bat, they didn't really understand it, but I think that I was always kind of a storyteller as a kid. Like I loved reading, I loved writing, I loved all those things. So they kind of like saw it coming from a mile away. And then I got into film, and I like one of my like core memories is like the first like short film that I directed. I was like 15.
That's crazy. Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
And then I somehow like convinced like a bunch of people from my high school to help me out. And my mom told me this like after the fact, but the night before, all of the people had to like show up to my house at like 5 a.m. to like help me out on like a weekend so that we could like start shooting early.
Yeah.
And my mom the night before like told me, she was like sitting there, she was just like, oh my God, like they're not going to show up. Like all these people are not, there's no way that they're going to show up at 5 a.m. And the morning of, she was so surprised because all of them showed up. And I think that that's like a massive, I was equally surprised, frankly. I was like ready for it all to go down the tubes as like little 15-year-old me. But I think that growing from that to someone who, went to their dream school, that sort of thing, there's a certain like scrappiness that I think needs to be associated with you if you're a filmmaker, and you need to be able to kind of like get the job done. And if things go wrong, like you need to be able to be a problem solver. And that like speaks a lot to your like future success, I think. So I'm kind of glad I didn't ever like attend like a school that was like a art school, because I think that being in an environment where like the other people weren't like super into the same things that I was, it kind of like forced me to be like resourceful with what I had.
Exactly.
And now that like I obviously like when I attended Tisch, that kind of like carried on in a way that I think was really useful. And I try and surround myself with people who are also similarly minded in that way of like, if a problem happens, not just like throwing up your hands and like kind of like giving up, but thinking about how to like maneuver your way out of it.
And that really
And I think
speaks, yeah. No, I mean, that really speaks volume and just the magnitude to your success too. And you keep saying that you have these small successes, but I think you've made it. You are here. You are representing so many of us, and it's just beautiful to see. And like not being in that environment, I feel like as an adaptive athlete or an adaptive person, a disabled person in the world, that's what we were fucking born with, to try and navigate the world without having those resources. And I just picture you like doing somersaults, being the super artsy person, the most like artistic of your, I mean, STEM folks, have their own aesthetic.
I think everything is art to a certain degree. It's just like storytelling is a very different kind of art as engineering or like robotics or coding. They're just like different like forms of it. But at the same time, like you have to be creative. If you are somebody that wants to design an app, like there is creativity associated with it. It's just not necessarily the traditional kind of storytelling that like I do, but I do admit the fact that there's creativity there is just slightly different. And I think that like respecting all fields is what is going to bring like innovation forward.
And you need each other to survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like technology is all over, and shoot, like even the technology that we're using now to be able to not be in a studio and record a podcast, I am super grateful for.
Exactly. Someone had to like build this microphone. Like there's engineering that went into it. Like I think about like the stand like being built a certain way so that it could like be small and compact but also effective. Like there's things like that. And like adaptive tools that we use, like my prosthetics and all of that. Like the people that go into like my prosthetist is a engineer of sorts. Like you have to have those skills, and I think that just like leaning on each other and respecting each other's the value that we bring is just the most important part.
I love that. And I mean, that's what kind of set you apart as a young 13, 14, 15-year-old producing and directing your own films. And I was going to say to him, like, high schoolers, of course they're going to show up at 5 a.m. They got nothing else to do but support their own friends and see that you are going to make it in life,
I think that it's just like a whole experience. And I think that like being disabled in like a field that requires people to like take bets on you is like a whole world in and of itself. And I'm like, it's the same thing with lifting, right? Like you have to have like a coach that understands you and is willing to work with you and believes in like your ability to reach these like milestones that you're looking towards, right?
Yeah. And that open-mindedness too, knowing that like, yes, I am who I am, but I can do this. There's so much there's so many hurdles that you have to get through in order to be seen.
Absolutely.
So did you have like a moment in the last 5-10 years where you kind of felt that like you were a disabled director, a disabled producer, like did you have that kind of experience where you were, I don't know, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. I actually remember this wasn't something that like made it into the final like Lifetime like cut, but you were discussing on that day about how like your family was like never treated you any differently.
mhm,
And I also had a very similar experience to that, where like my family was all like fully able-bodied people. And I was never like raised with like the mindset of
like you're
you know,
different, or
like
you're, yeah,
you have to like you can do less than us. Like that was never like the thing that was put upon me. So obviously like when I like started in experiencing ableism, I like didn't understand what was going on at first. I was just
huh?
like what do you mean? Like, huh? So because like my mom, like all the doctors like always like told my mom like your daughter's never going to be able to ride a bike, like she like it's just not going to happen,
Oh
like
my
she
gosh.
doesn't have legs, like she's never going to be able to ride a bike. And my mom was like, bet. Like,
That is the support I need in my
watch me.
life.
And then like I was like 8 and my mom was just like, you're going to learn how to ride a bike.
Oh yeah.
And then she taught me how to ride a bike, and like I can't there's like certain things that I can't do with riding a bike, but you know, she found like the adaptive tools to be able to get me to ride a bike. Like I like grew up in California, where like I'm sure that you also like experience this, like bike
Yeah.
riding is like a massive like cultural thing
Of
in
like your
California.
childhood growing up,
Yeah.
right? Like taking the
Um
tricycle, the wheels off your tricycle.
yeah, exactly. Like in Northern California, like biking is such a thing there. Um that it's not like when you're in New York, where like if you grew up in New York City, like if you don't know how to ride a bike, it's not like a massive deal. But in
Hmm.
California, because it's such a big thing, my mom taught me how to ride a bike, and it was I think a lot of people, it surprised a lot of people.
And prove that doctor wrong. I
Yeah.
hope you went back into one of those appointments and said, look at it.
Look at what I can do.
So that's
So
pretty young though, at the age of
yeah.
8, for you to
Yeah, I think I
experience
was
that level of ableism.
yeah, so it was one of those things where the like doctors were also like, oh, like your daughter's gonna be tall, so she's probably not gonna be able to like walk after like a certain point. Because I'm like, I was supposed to be 5'10".
Hmm.
Um, I now like with prosthetic legs, I'm like 5'7", but I was supposed to be like 5'10". So like I'm a tall queen,
Yeah,
but
you are.
so all of the doctors are like, oh, she's gonna be tall, so she's not gonna be able to walk after a certain point. But like again, like it was one of those things where like
Interesting
just like
logic
don't give
though.
up. Um
Yeah,
because like farther off the ground obviously like makes it harder
right.
to like move your body in a safe way. Um but I think that like it's one of those things where um as I was growing up and that sort of thing, it was never, ableism was always something that wasn't from like, I was never like treated differently in my family. So when I experienced it, it was it was always like it was always like framed for me as nothing's wrong with me. There's
Hmm.
something wrong with people who are looking at me and who view me in a way that is inherently lesser than a person who has all 4 limbs. Like there's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with me, it's something that's wrong with them. um but I think that by existing in this world, we kind of start to think like, I want to prove them wrong, I want to like change that,
yeah,
because I don't want kids in the future to also experience this attitude that they are lesser, and have to like fight through that. I want to make things easier for them, and that has been like a massive part of my storytelling. um and I think that that goes for a lot of my other marginalized identities too.
for sure.
And like the discussions that are surrounding that, but especially I think with um disability, like being able to like direct something for Lifetime with you, like as the subject and giving you a platform to discuss ableism, to discuss how you have overcome a lot of the opinions that are kind of like thrown at you, because I don't like the like thing of like overcome your disability. Like I don't think that
Right.
that's not
Overcome
how
your
we should
opinions is what we
overcome like shitty opinions.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah.
what the discussion should be. Has
Yeah.
nothing to do with like what's like wrong with you. It's all of these like the whole of society being built so that abled people are put ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being able to do that, and yeah.
And that framework though, just that maturity and mindset, I feel like I didn't gain until 20 years later, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's such a it makes me so proud like of you and of like people like us who have worked so hard to just love ourselves and to
Yeah.
tell ourselves that we can make it in almost any industry that we want to, almost any sport that we want to, with some changes, with some adaptations, with some support and resource, like,
Yeah.
but to know from the get-go that this is a systemic issue and not my own fault, like it just gives me chills because you know, like a lot of us or some of us have experienced like bullying from other children, other peers or teachers or people who just thought less than,
Yeah,
who are not our
absolutely.
own family members. It's like it's none of your business how I live my life. Two, why can't we just be more supportive for each other so that we can all grow, right? And
Yeah.
I just love that for you. And sorry, my headphones are falling and it's just so important to kind of to have that strength and to also like kind of put up a wall, right? And
Mm-hmm.
let that type of negativity reflect back onto themselves. And sometimes we have the energy, sometimes we have the energy to kind of make that a lesson for them or have them just realize that what they're saying and what they're doing is wrong. But the fact that like you're prioritizing like your mental health and your heart and moving forward um in, you know, just doing what you love in life, that's your, you know, that's huge motivation for the rest of us, I'd have to say.
I think that like it's always one of those things that I think is like disabled people, it's so weird because I'm sure that you experience this um in athletics, but this like idea that we're both considered like lesser, but also given like people will argue that we're given like unfair advantages.
Mm.
And
Mm.
like that, I'm like, did you stretch before that reach? Like, pick a struggle, pick one. You can't have both. You can't say that I'm worse than you and
Mhm.
that also somehow I get more opportunities than you because I'm disabled. It doesn't work that
Say
way.
it louder, say it louder. And that all of a sudden we're like these, I don't know. It's ridiculous. Like the fact that we ask for accommodations to be able to sit in you know, a level playing field as everyone else, and they see that as a major advantage because it's
Yeah.
not for the able-bodied. Like take COVID, for example, right? All of the accommodations that so
Mm-hmm.
many of us asked for in the workplace, in school, all of a sudden, overnight, they were able to create those accommodations for the able bodied population. Where the fuck was
Yeah.
that 5 years ago, even 2 years ago?
Oh my gosh. It's so
And so, I mean, have you found yourself in a position with employers or schools in the past where you've needed accommodation going into, say, a stage or going into work? And I don't know. I'm just so curious what it's like behind the scenes. Like, what is that like
yeah.
for you?
I think that it's similar almost. I think that film is a very unique educational experience. I think that being a filmmaker, like every single person like that works in like a camera department, like works out like crazy, like because they have to. Like your body is your biggest tool a lot of the time on set, and it's treated as such in like filmmaking in schools. So many classes are very, very physical at Tisch. If it's not like a writing class or like a theory class or a history class or anything like that. All the production classes are so physical. But I think that I, throughout my time, experienced quite a bit of ableism, because the film industry, similar to like what you've experienced with lifting, is built for abled people to succeed, like everything else. But in particular, because it's such a physical career, there was so much ableism. And I think that it's a part of it because it is ingrained into the industry. The film industry is deeply flawed in a lot of ways, and one of those ways is that there is so much ableism, and all of the professors and all of the students and all of the staff and everybody in all of these film schools are a part of that industry or wanting to be a part of that industry, and in turn those flaws within that industry come out in each of those people. So when you're a disabled person and you're one of the only disabled people at an institution, a lot of the time you're going to face that ableism threefold, and then those same people are going to be like, oh well, I can't cast a disabled person because there's no, or I can't hire a disabled person because there's no disabled people. Well, yeah, because when they're in school you were telling them constantly that they can't be a part of this industry. So of course when you get into the real world and you're trying to cast a film or you're trying to hire somebody who's disabled to be a producer, you spent 4 years in your education telling the disabled person next to you that they shouldn't be allowed on set because they need accommodation.
Right.
I can't stand for 12 hours the same way somebody else can on set. And as soon as you take those accommodations, you're shamed for it. Whereas, like, I've worked on set with people who complain the entire time about standing up for 12 hours, but they're allowed to do it, but I can't.
Right,
because if I do it, then it's attributed to my disability and that like I'm difficult to work with, and you're not fit for the job. But like Mary Sue next to me is allowed to like bitch for 12 hours. Are you kidding me? Like
yeah, where's the line? And you're right, it's so ingrained from the start, even like in public education before going into all of that. It's just, we have to choose our path, and the fact that you are still there, like paving the way for so many disabled like future producers, future filmmakers and writers. It's like, I'm going to keep saying this, but it is incredible, because like it's already hard enough as it is for some of us to disclose that disability in an interview, right? And to think in production, in things where, like you said, you have to move. So if you're moving equipment, you're having to get on stage where there's nothing but stairs, no lift, right? To even get backstage. And I know, because I'm like front facing, like I managed entertainment venues, but only saw like a glimpse of what production had to deal with. And it is a lot of like heavy lifting, but to just look at you and say, you can't do this, is unfair.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just you get ingrained fear for asking for anything to make your life easier, because you know that people are going to assume then that you can't do your job. And I think that like changing that narrative is a massive part of what I want to do and why I'm in entertainment. because I don't think that there should be that fear for disabled folks to ask for what they need. I think that it should be viewed as like flattening the playing field, leveling the playing
Totally.
field, as you've said. But oftentimes I think that like any sort of adaptive tool is considered both an advantage and also something to be shamed
And it
over.
shouldn't be. It should not be.
It shouldn't be either of those things. It is a neutral thing that you
Yeah.
are getting.
Yeah.
Like a band-aid if you cut your finger. Like it shouldn't be like a big deal.
Yeah.
Like it should just be like a thing that is. But that's not the way that it's currently treated. In any industry, but I've just observed it obviously the most within the entertainment industry.
Mhm.
I always say that like ableism is a type of discrimination that has an excuse built in. Right?
And that's
Like,
the first thing
oh,
I
we can't do
say
it.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
A sad excuse.
exactly like it's always like, oh, like we can't have Mel on set because we're filming in a fourth floor walk up. Like, did you ask me if I can walk up a fourth floor walk
Exactly.
up?
Ask those questions. And if I say no, then we move on to the next thing that I can do. It's not that
Exactly.
complicated. It really
Mhm.
isn't. Like people think that maybe we should change the word. Maybe we shouldn't even use the word accommodation because I feel like people tense up when we use
People
that
are
word.
like, I have to accommodate because
The
accommodate.
ADA is coming after us.
Yeah.
And they should. It was built for
I'm
a
calling
reason.
them right now. Stay right where you are. They're on the way. Do you hear those sirens? They spell your death.
I really wish it was like that. I really wish we had some sort of 1-1 number that we can call, like a 011 number.
I'll be the one taking those phone calls. I'm on my way.
Because like the first thing you think of is like, okay, do parking lots have handicap spaces? Does a building have an elevator? There are these checklists, right? That many managers or architects have to kind of go by. But when you say like, all you had to do was ask me, all we had to do was have a conversation because everyone's disability is different. It's as simple as that, right? And like it's just so tiring that we hear excuse after excuse. But I mean, I think what is making a difference too is like the power that I feel like you are in now to kind of help change that conversation and that dynamic. For one, casting, right? Casting somebody like me and not making that excuse that, well, we couldn't find any disabled people to be a part of this Lifetime series, so we're only going to cover like able-bodied white women. The center. I think the way that we like center media and center like Hollywood, I don't know, you're just making a huge difference, and I hope you applaud yourself for that.
I always say like I'm 23, like I have time. Like I keep on like trying to tell myself that. As like I do recognize that I'm at like the beginning of my career. But it always I don't know if you also like share this, but it feels like there's like urgency there. Because I know that like every year I hope that Tish has like more disabled kids like going in and having these conversations, like frank conversations with like their like abled counterparts, like whether it be professors or other students or staff, and what inclusion like really means at the end of the day, and that it shouldn't be like treated as like a burden, because I think that that's oftentimes like how a lot of fields are treating it like, oh, we have to like check this box of like, okay, we have to have like this many people of color and this many women and this many non-binary folks, and like go down like the list.
Right.
Whereas it should be like treated as, when you have something that is different about you, you are inherently bringing depth to whatever you're working on. And that's just like currently just like not the way that it's treated. I think that like a lot of the time people view like it as all the steps you need to go through,
Right.
to be able to submit to like this and this festival, or apply to this and this thing, or get this and this grant, when that shouldn't be the case. It's the more people that you include that are different from yourself and that have different life experiences and complex life experiences, the better your project is going to be at the end of the day.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. And like, why wouldn't you, if you're creating film or you're creating art, right? Like, want to appeal to the masses. We are the
exactly.
We're everywhere.
Yeah.
You can't get rid of us.
COVID has, like, by virtue of like long COVID, has had more and more disabled people in the United States just from like contracting the virus. Like that's just like COVID has changed people's lives. And all of those people deserve to see representation and to see themselves on screen. There's so many disabled people in this world, and yet it's like such an ignored I almost said like genre of person. That's not what I meant at all.
No, and we know what you mean. Like,
exactly.
And like, why do we have to be shamed for it? We are like even prior to COVID, we were already 25%. We make up 25%. Every, like, 1 in every 4 people that you know is disabled in some form. There's no age that you reach where you suddenly become disabled. It could happen at any time.
Exactly.
Born with it. You could, you know, and I think people don't understand that. They don't.
And people also ignore like chronic illness and things like that, and invisible disabilities. That like you don't see like with your 2 eyes, that like, oh, this person is disabled, like I'm very visibly disabled, but like not every disabled person is like that, and things still affect them. But it's like so ignored. I
listened to this podcast, I think it was like 3 years ago when I was still working in the entertainment industry, and she put it in the most beautiful way when it came to accommodations in the building and in the arts. In that, because that's what I did front of house, so a lot of it's audience facing, you know, audience services, making sure that we made every experience not just accommodating, but what was the word that we made it a very similar experience for everybody. And that was to use all 5 senses when you're either building a project or you know, writing a play or whatever. Is can I see this art? Can I hear this art? Not necessarily smell, or can I feel this art, right? And to make it as simple as that, you know, taking into account folks who are blind, hard of hearing, putting closed captioning or having like additional accommodations for folks so that they can enjoy art the same way that everyone else is. And absolutely. Isn't like, even like ASL, like interpreters, how that's so much more important for people when enjoying art, like listening to a concert or whatever, because they're enjoying it at the same time as everyone else, or they're not missing the punchline because they had to read, you know, like closed captioning is great, but like you want to make sure that they're all enjoying it at the same time, or making sure that even if you have a wheelchair, if it's, sorry, not a wheelchair, an elevator, If it's like at the very far end of the building where the patron had to travel 2, 3, 4 miles in order to get there, and then enjoy it with the rest of their friends, like enjoy the show with the rest of their friends afterward, that's not intentionally inclusive,
Yeah.
right? You're just
It's
checking something
othering.
off a list.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, we did our part, but are they actually enjoying this, or did they have a horrible experience because they're just second nature? Like, you didn't consider them from the get-go. And that's just so special. Like, why can't we do that everywhere else? Even entertainment industries, it's hard to work with, companies that don't consider that.
I think that like a big part of it though is that hiring disabled people to consult on those accommodations is going to, like, in my opinion, like resolve, I don't know if you agree, but like resolve like so much of it, because if you are thinking about like an elevator or the way to like where seats should be, that sort of thing, for like disabled folks, like accessing being able to access a theater. If you are an abled person and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, how am I going to design this theater? Your first thought is most likely going to be the way that you would want to experience the art, and not necessarily the way that somebody who has a fundamental difference in the way that they experience the world. There is that, and it's either like you have to do like a lot of research or just include like the people that you are building these things for. And I hope that a lot of theaters are, and a lot of like venues and places to create art are considering that now. I went to like see Wicked like a couple weeks ago. My partner had never seen it, and I was like, we're gonna go see Wicked, because I had like a voucher because like the shows got like all canceled like around like the holidays because of Omicron. But we went to see Wicked, and they were, I mean, granted, like that theater was on it about like accommodations and their elevator and that sort of thing. Like the elevator was like right next to the stairs, like they were on it. And it was really, really impressive. Whereas other theaters, either you have to go in like some, like as you were saying, like a convoluted like hallway and
down
like,
into Narnia in order to find your seat, literally.
Yeah, just go down 17 blocks, turn left, pay the bridge troll, and then like maybe you'll find like an elevator that smells musty because we haven't been there in 20 years. Like of course, like people are going to have like, like you checked off that ADA guideline thing, but you're not actually being inclusive. And I think that there's a massive difference there.
There's a major difference. Those were the words she used. There's a major difference in being accessible and being equitable.
Absolutely.
And the goal is to be as equitable as possible. Like, we want to make sure that Mel or Marybeth enjoys the show with the rest of their friends, not by themselves in some poor corner and sits in the back of the theater because it was where it was most convenient, for for the theater. And I think these conversations are just so necessary, and sometimes it is like exhausting. But like you said, like time is now. Like I do feel like we should have started this years ago. But it is important to like hire more of us to be a part of the conversation, or to hire us as consultants. Even if like, and the same way that I think, there's this huge trend in companies and corporations to start hiring folks of color to lead these diversity, right, DEI trainings.
I mean, as they should.
as we should. always include accessibility in that. And that's one of the first things I did before leaving tell performances too, is like include accessibility and people with disabilities and so many other intersections into your conversations of inclusion, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just tokenizing the brown or black person, the immigrant, the queer person, the disabled person. It's hearing them out.
Yeah. Seeing them as like a complete person with like very complex views. Because I know that like not everybody is going to have like the same opinion. Um, and it's important to hear, I think, everybody out. Even the people that you disagree with. I've been like fortunate in the sense that um when I have like spoken to professors and that sort of thing, and other students at Tisch, they have been, and like Emery and Natalia, like as soon as like they speak to me and we like get into that nitty gritty of my experiences and you know, the way that I have moved through the entertainment industry, they're incredibly supportive and they want to make those changes. They want to help me make those changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've been very fortunate in that sense that like I've never like I've never experienced like a whole lot of pushback from the people that have given me the chance to speak about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've spoken to like the dean of film and TV at Tisch, like the head of the film and TV department, who's just like a lovely guy and like was incredibly respectful and receptive. All of my friends are incredibly respectful and receptive and want to make these changes and want to go like above and beyond. And I think that as long as they also are coming to fellow abled people and saying like, oh, like we should make these changes, we should change our thoughts about this, our thought process about accessibility, about accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
Having those allies out there is incredibly important, I think.
Oh, for
um
sure.
to like the overall, because again, like as you were saying, like it gets exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting to constantly think that this mission like befalls like only
On
disabled people's
us.
shoulders. Like
Uh-huh. Yeah, 100%. And I tell tons of my abled friends, tell your abled friends.
yeah.
Like, and don't just whisper it in my ear or in my DM that you support me. Show me that you support me. Show me in this industry that that you can make a difference with me. And I feel like we have been seeing a little bit more of that. And I don't want to just speak on the negative experiences. There are some positive experiences that come out of that, but like you said, we have to keep working, and
Yeah.
our friends, our employers have to keep working with us.
Yeah. And I think that that's the case about like every single marginalized identity. There's so much work to do towards like everything, and making things equitable. Um, but having people who are receptive is incredibly valuable. And I don't want to like ever overlook that.
Yeah.
I know that there's so much like work to be done, but something that I'm always super thankful for are people who hear my story, hear what I'm trying to do, and are supportive and kind of like are hand in hand with me in
Mhm.
like the fight to make this world a little bit more um, conducive to disabled folks and our stories. Uh, yeah, and I always try and keep thankful for that.
Wow. And with that, let's take a short break because that
Okay,
was a great
cool.
way to end the first half. Okay, so that was a lot. That was a lot, and thank you so much for sharing that, Mel. That's incredibly it speaks to the volume of how much work needs to be done in production, filmmaking,
Yeah.
and in all industries, in sports, in just all types of entertainment and arts, like just the power to kind of hear us out and see how accommodations are, you know, absolutely easy
Yeah.
if you just include us.
If you
um,
talk to us.
that's all we're asking for. Like, it'd be nice to have a vote on the board, but literally
It's
just
also, yeah, I think that it also like goes hand in hand, because you need to have those people there, but you also, they need to be encouraged in the sense that their accommodations are not a bad thing. Because if you're constantly like telling them like it's a bad thing to have to be accommodated in any sort of way, and you kind of like, society like brainwashes you to think that, then like when you ask them, hey, what accommodations could we have, they're gonna be like, nothing. Because they had to like bust their ass for however long to not have to use accommodations.
right.
So
Or they thought that they had everything on the checklist covered. And so, well, if it's not in the ADA handbook, then we did our part. Like, no, actually, every disability, every illness, chronic illness is different. Like, some people need a nearby bathroom to their desk, or they need, you know, to throw away their syringe after, you know, injecting themselves with whatever like medicine they need at work.
insulin.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a constant battle just to survive and live the everyday life. Like, I want to do a good job at my job as well, and you can help me do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there is so much to be offered, as long as, because the thing is that if a person isn't given accommodations, they can't perform to their highest ability.
Yeah.
It's just like not going to be like a thing. They're going to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that there's a lot of missteps in like, also that being a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like if you bring me onto set and you don't have like anywhere safe for me to like sit uh every like couple of hours, I'm understandably going to be exhausted, and I'm going to move slower and with less efficacy than my abled counterparts, um even though we've been standing like technically the same amount of time.
Right.
So then you can say like, oh well, Melina doesn't do their job as well, or I'm like mentally exhausted, so I'm not as like on top of it as everybody else, because I've like, being disabled is also like a mental
For
thing of
sure.
like, you have to like mentally like think about like where your body is in space in a lot more detail than an abled person. So I'm mentally doing that, and as I get exhausted, that gets harder, so my brain and my head is less in the game in relation to production. And then they say like, oh well, you aren't doing as good of a job, so we don't want to like hire you, or they like
Mhm.
talk smack or whatever. Whereas if even like a small accommodation, like a chair somewhere
Right.
close to the action where I can just like sit for like 5 minutes every 2 hours, um, I could perform the same as like another able person.
Oh yeah. It
Yeah.
just makes me want to kick them if they say that. Like, for once, just like put yourself in my shoes also. And I think as like people of color, or, and I don't want to keep saying this, but we constantly also have to try and prove ourselves, and we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have to work 5 times as hard just to do the same job, right?
Yeah.
And
I
then
always
when
say
we
like 10
don't,
times as hard for half the recognition.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And shit, we should be getting paid more if I'm doing 5 times as much. You know, you get exhausted after 2 hours versus like the 4, and it's not
Yeah.
your fault. It's because they couldn't accommodate for you, and to just be able to voice that, I think, to, you know, your current employers now or future employers, like, that's super important and hard enough as it is to not like constantly try and like prove ourselves and ignore our own accommodations, because I feel like that is something that happens a lot. We tend to forget what we need in order to prove ourselves worthy or equal as our abled counterparts, because we can perform that job, or we can, you know, go to the same school, and that's a dialogue that needs to change in all management, in all you know, hiring fields as well. And
the
so,
thing that I've also, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The thing that I've also noticed is that this is the thing with, I think, all marginalized identities, where if a person with a marginalized identity is included in something, and this goes for a lot of them, like let's say a woman is hired on a set, she needs to be so excessively good at her job, not even to just get hired, but because when a man, or when if it's a disabled person, an abled person, if it's a person of color and a white person, when that marginalized person is doing their job, they are, whatever they do is somehow reflected onto their entire community. Where if a disabled person shows up to set and they aren't head and shoulders above skill wise everybody else, they are immediately reflected as worse than everybody else, and then that producer, that executive, whoever, is going to say, well, we're not going to hire another disabled person because this person just like didn't meet our expectations. Whereas that would never happen to a heterosexual cisgender white man. What he does is a reflection of him, not of his whole community. Whereas a marginalized person, what they do is a reflection of their entire community. And I just like simply don't think that that's fair. Like, like if another disabled person didn't do a good job, like, we're a different person, completely different people, but somehow it's, you are representing everybody like you, and everybody like you is representing you. And I just don't think that that is fair at all, because we are individuals with individual life experiences and individual education and all of that. So as much as I want to make life easier for other disabled people, I also think that we're all different.
No, 100%. And that level of pressure that one has to take on top of, again, working 5 times as hard, like, it's a hard thing. And like, I feel like a lot of us have been the first of our kind doing and performing a lot of the things that we do. Like when I started powerlifting, I didn't know of any other like upper limb different folks at the time that used similar, you know, attachments or adaptive tools that I used, until I started like stalking. So like social media is like such a beautiful thing, because you find other people in your community that you would have never found in person. And that's why a lot of like my closest friends live in freaking Florida, Marcia, and we've never met. And because we just connect on so many different levels and find others like ourselves to kind of move forward and kind of break those barriers for the rest of us. And that's the beauty, I think, of being the first, you know, is like, it is a lot of pressure. And we do, I try not to represent, you know, other limb different folks. Like everybody is unique and has their own story and experiences those disabilities in so many different ways.
And I also admit the privilege that I have. I think that it's important to also like admit the privilege that we have. I have the privilege of using prosthetic legs. And like having that resource and having parents that are very supportive. And I know that I carry that privilege, and being able to admit that is a massive part of it, because things that are accessible to me are not going to be accessible to somebody with the same amputations, but they aren't they aren't using prosthetic legs.
Right.
They're using a wheelchair, or they're using crutches, or they're using like other resources. So having that mindset, I think, is also very important.
Yeah, and the advancement of technology that we have access to compared to so many other countries is like incredible. Like I remember super early in the morning, you told me right before our our video shoot, right? You had some issues with your prosthetic where you had to go and find not your prosthetist in a completely different state, but your screws became loose and you had to like fix that within an hour. And like,
I have that resource, other people won't. And it was a whole journey. I thought it was like very poetic.
You can write a short film about it.
Like the journey of doing that. And like, thank God I was with two like people, like Emery and I, like me, Emery, and Natalia like joke like, oh, like my lesbian moms,
yeah.
That like are incredibly like caring human beings, were there and very, very helpful in kind of like taking me to the place and like super early. And like I have a process in New York who's like an incredible guy, and he like made the calls necessary to make sure that I could get in.
Yeah.
But it was like a privilege, right?
Yeah. And you can see it in two different perspectives. Like I can totally, like, yes, one, you did have the resource at the time, luckily, and you do have that privilege to be able to fix it like within a day. But an able-bodied person wouldn't have to worry about that after a flight. You know, they just get their full night's sleep. They're not worrying about having to put on some legs in the morning and making sure that it doesn't fall apart when you walk around, right? Like, and yeah, I'm just saying
intersection is important to like understand. I think that intersectionality, like for example, I'm a woman, so women are inherently like treated less seriously in like the medical field. So if I tell somebody that something is wrong, they are much more likely to look at me and say like, oh, you're hysterical, like you're too anxious, like take a chill pill, because of the fact that I'm a woman. Whereas like if a man said the same thing, he would be treated more seriously.
100%.
So there's like so much that goes into it, that I think is important to recognize, which also like speaks back to the fact that we're all different and that everybody's going to have a different experience. If I speak to someone else, they're going to have different opinions than I am, perhaps.
And
the point is to accommodate all of it.
No, yeah, for sure. That reminds me of a little story that you told me in the car, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but being on the plane and sitting in an emergency exit, and a man, like an able-bodied man, pointing at you and saying, "You're not fit to sit there because you're visibly disabled."
Yeah, I was on the plane. I forget where we were going, but it was like a family. I was with both of my parents. And the guy like came up and like basically I was like how old is I was like a teenager, like a young, I was like a young like preteen, like in the like obviously when you're a preteen you're also like, don't look at me, I will explode, like don't nobody look at me. I'm like, I have a breakout, like just like straight up, because you're not having a good time at all when you're 12. It doesn't matter who you are.
I know.
Being 12 is just a bad time.
And everyone's opinions back then mattered for
and
some
everyone's
reason.
Opinions are just so important.
Stop staring at me.
Exactly. And then this like grown ass man like coming up to me being like, you shouldn't be in this seat.
Damn.
And it was just like so uncomfortable because I'm like, you're beefing with a 12-year-old. Like that's weird. Like you're weird for that.
Yeah. And to just and point at someone too with their parents there, and so what ended up happening?
So I got like, it was like a key with like every flight attendant on the plane. I felt like I don't remember it like super clearly, but I do remember being asked to leave and being moved seats. in front of everybody, which is super awkward. But my dad was like, you should shake her hand, like to the guy, like you should shake my daughter's hand because she's the strongest person that you know. And that was incredibly powerful because that was what my childhood was. Like my parents like never treated me as anything, like as I mentioned at the beginning, like it was just like I was never lesser ever. I was held to the same standards. And I was given the same amount of opportunity. I was never like looked down upon. So again, like when things like that happened, it's like forever gonna be like burned in my memory. Like the dude that was like literally a 40-year-old man like beefing with me when I was 12 because I was sitting in the, I'm like, if you wanted the exit that bad, you want the exit row that bad.
Like you probably wouldn't even be able to save half of the people on this plane, dude.
No. I'm like, I get it. You want to go down the slide first. Like, okay. Chill. Okay, here you go. Like, you're weird.
But that's like, yeah, the level of embarrassment there for you and for your parents, it shouldn't have happened. It really shouldn't have happened. And I think we should all go out into the public eye, like grocery stores, schools, airplanes, airports, not like judging people based on their appearance. Like you don't know my life. You don't know the capabilities that I have. And I think that shows how important you'll going back to school, going back to how we were molded at a very young age. Like that guy probably wasn't taught like everyone's capabilities are different, no matter their disability, no matter their race, no matter.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to like trust people when they say that they can do something, just as much to trust people when they say I can't do something, can I have help? Like those are two things that I think are removed from disabled people so often, that we're not trusted in either direction. Like I remember the story that you just told me about the go-kart in the car
at Six Flags.
It's the same. It's a very similar story.
Yeah. And again, it's embarrassing because the same way that you got pulled out of that airplane seat that you probably paid for, those things are not cheap. I paid extra to drive a go-kart with my little brother and in front of the rest of my family, who I was like almost the mother to. And the crowd of go-karters like got pulled out of the car and said I couldn't drive, and to have to explain ourselves too, like it brought me to tears, and it was so bad I wanted to file a lawsuit, and that they didn't even have like proof that someone like me couldn't drive a go-kart, right? Like, show me where it says that I can't drive a go-kart. I can show you my driver's license. I could be a freaking NASCAR driver. I could be a million different things that you assumed I was not. And you know, like it kind of broke their hearts because they felt like they were just abiding by the rules. But those rules, like who made them? Able-bodied folks.
It also tells all the people around you in that moment that, oh, this is an acceptable way to treat somebody who is different than you. You can make those assumptions. Right, there's going to be like a bunch of people, and now all those people, are they going to go into another flight and tell the flight attendant, oh, I saw a disabled person sitting in the exit row and another disabled person got kicked out the last time I was in, so they should also be kicked out.
Right.
Like all of them are going to like have that in their memory too, of like, oh, on this flight they said that a disabled person couldn't do this, so no disabled people could do this. I have never been on a plane that went down, but if I did, I promise you, I could open up that exit door. I want the extra leg room.
Oh, there is more leg room there in the middle, right?
Yeah, that's why you like pay extra.
Oh, come on now. Hell no. Oh my God. And
And now I'm
like,
so afraid of like going to an exit row. I'm like, I'm going to London in August with my partner, and I want like that exit row so bad, but I'm like, I don't want to be kicked out.
but and that needs to change, right? That needs to change, or like, or the extra effort too sometimes that we have to make in explaining ourselves before getting rejected. Like, hey, listen, I have a disability, I have A, B, and C, and I can do A, B, and 1, 2, and 3, right, at my job or using this public resource. And sometimes people wear a fucking sign on themselves saying, I am totally capable of, doing these things. Please don't help me, or please help me, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And that extra step that we have to do in order to not be rejected is hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
I think it's like boundaries are super important as a disabled person. I get like stopped in the street, like sometimes like my shoe will be untied, and like able people will like stop me and be like, your shoe is untied, and then go down to tie it. I'm like, you're weird.
That's my personal
like, get
space.
away from me. That's my personal space. I live in New York. I have mace in my pocket and I will use it. I'm like,
people
you're
have
weird.
gone up and tied your shoe?
Yes. So weird.
Thinking they're doing you a favor, right?
Yes. And like if I fall in public, like usually it's always men. It is always men. I will say that. Like they will come and just like grab me and try and like pull me up. I'm like, I am so close to your crotch, sir. Oh my God. Do not make me use that as a as a deterrent. Let me go. I'm like, get your hand off of me. I hate that. And my partner, I don't remember when this was happening, but I ate it at some point. Like I fell, which is fine. Like I get up, I'm fine. But they know that to not touch me when I'm getting up, because it makes it harder for me, because I have a certain way that I am going to get up from the floor. And if someone is touching me, we're both going to get hurt. Like it's just not going to work out. So like, please don't touch me. And they know that. And I fell at some point, and people were giving them the dirtiest looks because they were like standing there waiting for me to get up, and they were getting just the dirtiest looks from people. But they almost want to be like, they could do it on their own. Yeah, I'm not. They're fine. She's hilarious. Fine. Like it's fine.
But like, and that goes back to rule number 1 is just ask before touching. That was the biggest rule for us. Again, in like an audience facing venue, is don't ever, even in an emergency, don't ever touch somebody and try to lift them off of their wheelchair without asking. Even if they're
kidnapping.
Yeah. Like imagine if someone were to do that to you. Like don't ever assume that you're doing them a favor. That's an invasion of their privacy, an invasion of their everyday livelihood, right? And that's also hilarious that they looked at your partner and was like, what the fuck are you doing? Help her.
Because literally was like just being respectful, like waiting for me. And like people were like, like this poor person was doing like what I asked. Like the assumption is always like, you help a disabled person like without asking. But I'm so uncomfortable like when I fall, and like someone will always like grab my arm and like yank me up, and I'm like, you're going to dislocate my shoulder before you help me, so I'm begging you to stop.
And you're gonna hurt yourself too.
And you're gonna hurt yourself too. Like what do you it's also, it's not like, oh my God, I need to get up off the floor now. You can have like the 0.2 seconds to ask me like, hey, do you need help? And I'm going to tell you no, but then it's just like the personal space is like eliminated when you're disabled. Like people like view you as like a little rag doll or like a damsel in distress, like all the time. Yeah. It's so weird.
That's like, it's so weird. I feel like, and a lot of us have dealt with a similar experience, or like not seeing us as human when something like that does happen, and speaking to our able-bodied friend instead of us when asking that biggest question, like, oh, what's wrong with her, what's wrong with them,
Oh my
or do they need help, or just all of these questions that they ask someone other than you, completely, like, I don't know, it's just there's so much, there's so much self-esteem and confidence that we have to work on going
Yeah,
about these
absolutely.
daily routines to try and cater to someone's shitty mindset.
Yeah, I think that because of the fact that oftentimes when you see disabled people in media, it's always in relation to abled guilt or comfort, in a
Oh,
sense. That's like most of the time when disabled people are included, it's so tied to an abled person's self-fulfillment. um so when people see a disabled person in public, they have been conditioned for so long to associate that person's struggle with their hero's journey, like their
mm,
main character moment. um and don't view us as our own complex people. Like we're almost like, like NPCs in video games.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
like we're almost like that to them because of the way that disabled people have been treated historically in media, I think.
Mm.
And I think that if you change that, it's a massive cultural shift that is going to occur and things are going to get a lot better. um but that takes, I think, a lot of complex, difficult conversations um that are like slowly happening and are necessary.
Oh, say that 5 times and say it louder. That's so powerful because that's so true. And like, we hate to target the male able ego, but I'm sorry, that's like, the world revolves around you in some way, and it's always you being the main character of this story. But like, let us be the main character for once. Let us
Mm-hmm.
tell our own story. Let us like live
Absolutely.
our lives without you assuming that you have to be the hero.
Yeah. I
Like,
think that like it's a part of that also is that disabled people are always like sad. Like we're always just like our lives are like so hard. Like they're just so bad. I don't like sit around like crying all day. Life is
yeah.
more complicated than that and more rich than that.
Hmm. And that's why, yeah, we stray away from using like um what is it, that the overcoming word, overcoming the disability, or
Overcoming
overcoming,
disability. I
yeah.
overcame it.
Or even using us as inspiration on the opposite end, right? There's so much inspiration porn in newspaper headlines, in freaking what we have just seen, Super Bowl commercials, or,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it's great again to highlight complex individuals like us, but without catering to your need as an able-bodied person, without
Yeah.
catering to you being the hero in the story.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that I get called an inspiration like constantly. um I always get like the two like probably like most common things that like get said to me in public is you're such an inspiration or thank you for your service.
Oh,
I
service.
Yeah, like people like assume that I'm a veteran and I'm like I like that's such a
Wow.
it's such an
My
awkward
mind
like
blew.
I get like asked that and there's no good way to respond. There's never a good way to
Whoa.
respond. But I get called like an inspiration like so often. uh it's really difficult because I think that there are parts of me that are inspiring, but I think that that is the case of most people. I am just very visibly, outwardly have like something that is different about me that I had to contend with. But I think that if you speak to most people, they have gone through something. So I get called an inspiration, but a lot of the times the people that say that about me know nothing about me. So you're just like saying that about somebody that looks different from you. And the thing that you are saying is you're inspiring because you are outside buying orange juice. And I would be sad if I were you. I would be inside crying if I were you. That's
Drinking
essentially
your
what you're
sad
saying.
orange juice.
Yeah. I'm like, I do this. I've been doing this for 20 years. Like there's no, I don't think that what I do is inspiring on a daily basis. Like I'm just, at Trader Joe's, like, please calm down.
Yeah.
But if you see me as like a filmmaker or like on set, or like you've seen my work and you say, oh, I think that you're inspiring to me because the world that you live in is ableist and you have accomplished this and this, because then you are recognizing a thing that I have done and not something that is visual about me.
Yeah.
Because my outward body, I think, is just the thing that like carries my brain from room to room. Like it's the vehicle of which I exist in the world, and commenting on that says nothing about me. I'm not an inspiration. You just think I look different than you do. And that's what you find. If that's what you find inspiring, you need to do some soul searching.
For sure. Like, what is the intention behind those words? That's what I always have to ask people. And if it's because you feel sorry for me, don't.
Yeah.
Don't. Like, you can feel sorry for me when I ask you to feel sorry for me, but not just based off of my appearance, right? Yeah. And the assumptions that you make that yes, my life is probably harder than yours, but that's like, you can't always assume that. You can't always assume that yeah. That was, well, shit. Thank you for sharing all of that.
I have a lot of opinions about being called inspiration.
and a lot of that, it still doesn't make sense to people. And I think that's why we have to constantly repeat it 64 episodes later on this podcast, and on our social media and everywhere else, is because they think that they're doing more good than harm in saying that. They think that it's a compliment. And as long as they remove themselves from the compliment, I think will lead them into, stronger conversations with folks like us.
Absolutely. I think that it's I don't think that it's with malintent, like being called like an inspiration. It's just that a lot of the times if you try and like have like a deeper conversation about it with that person, they oftentimes are like, it was just a compliment. Like they get then defensive, because they expect, I think a lot of the times, I don't know if I'm sure that you've also experienced, I don't know, but they expect disabled people to play like a certain role for them. And once they like assign that to them, if you break out of that, if you like are at all like outspoken, like loud, mean, like I've been called mean so many times, for just like setting a boundary, then it can spiral like so fast if you don't like fit into that box. Yeah.
No, that's so true. And fuck fitting into boxes, because we are bigger than that. We set a platform everywhere we walk.
Exactly.
Without being too vain, of course, but No, but seriously,
I set a platform everywhere I walk, and I'm also so pretty. But I'm so humble too.
That humility. No, yeah, 100% yes. And that's just so important for us to hear time and time again. So thank you. Thank you for chatting with me on a Sunday afternoon, and
It was
hopefully our
great.
dogs can have a play date sometime.
One day.
And one day when you're ever back in the Bay Area. But please tell our listeners if they're able to find you anywhere on a website, if anyone wants to contact you or share their story. Is there a way for people to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put my Instagram on public again just for this occasion. And my Instagram handle is, I recently changed it, so I just want to make sure that I get it correct. M as in Mary, Melina, Melina KOS
Awesome.
is my Instagram handle. Or you can just search up my name on Instagram. It's an uncommon name, so it'll come up, Melina Nakos. So yeah, I would love to hear opinions, stories, common experiences, and thoughts with anybody else.
Other people in the film industry as well. Like, it's a great
Yeah,
way for people
absolutely.
to connect. It's amazing. And thank you again for everything that you have done so far. I know there is a lot of work to be done, but you're off to a great start, God damn it.
One step at a time, always one step at a time. That is always the key.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Disabled Girls out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Bye.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording.